I really like to put front and center in prevention the U equals U message as well, because I know that I'm living with HIV. I know that I'm on treatment and I can't pass it on. So effectively, I'm the safe bet. If you want to avoid getting HIV, sleep with someone who has it and is on treatment, because they're not going to give it to you.
I remember clocking that when we were doing that campaign. I was like, oh, it's kind of a slay.
Yeah, it's quite a confronting message. If you want to avoid getting HIV, sleep with someone who knows they have it and is on treatment.
Yeah. Give It To Me By would like to acknowledge that we live and work on Gadigal land. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past and present. Sovereignty was never ceded.
I'd also really like to acknowledge the people living with HIV that are listening, the ones that aren't listening, and also the ones that are no longer here with us, especially the people living with HIV who sacrificed their bodies and their lives to develop the medication and create the structures that benefit us today to give us access to the treatment that keeps me alive and the preventative medication prep that keeps many people HIV negative. It's really important we acknowledge the people that have just put in so much hard work over this 40 plus year long pandemic that have got us to where we are today.
This is Give It To Me Bi, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything from a bi plus perspective. I'm Chad Barnier.
And I'm Steve Spencer. Together, we're diving into the real stories, the challenges, and the celebrations of the bi plus community. We are here to learn together and, of course, to laugh together.
From personal journeys to cultural moments, we are here to amplify a bi plus point of view and spark conversations that matter.
So, whether you're bi, pan, queer, or just curious, join us as we explore the world of bi plus experiences.
Now, let us give it to you by.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Give It To Me By, I was going to say the sickness episode, but that is not the way to frame this episode.
No, we're leaving that in. No,
it's not okay.
No, we can leave it. I give permission. Chad is referring to my current chest infection. So everyone, if I sound a bit off, and actually, if you're watching on YouTube, I look like I'm crying. Like this.
Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I called it the sickness episode. That's so bad.
It is the sickness episode because I am sick. But more importantly, this is the episode that we are doing for World AIDS Day, and I am a person living with HIV, and I am not sick because I am a person living with HIV. I am sick because maybe I made out with the wrong person. I don't know.
Yeah, listen, that's probably more likely. You're also worked to the bone, Steve. You are in high demand. The supply and demand of you does not equal.
No, it's that time of year. It's just AGM after AGM and conferences, and it's like it's cool because. Lots of, Chad, lots of exciting things are in the pipeline. And did my voice just break?
That's great. Well, yeah, you are a well-integrated person in the community and all the different areas that you care about, which is super cool. And then you've got little old me being like, hey, Steve, do you reckon we could record? Chad, I'm dying over here. But people really want to hear from you. Now, Steve's getting no sleep for very good reasons. And then I'm just like, I have a small window. I have a child and a job and my window is small.
This is the other thing. This is such a lesson in I hate speaking up because normally I'm Mr. Yes, right? And so are you. But then, we have to acknowledge everyone's got their own thing. I'm like, you've got a human being you have to look after. You've got two human beings, but you have to keep yourself alive and your child. I'm barely keeping myself alive.
I didn't realize we were going to get into the lesson so early in the episode, but you're totally right. You have to advocate for yourself because if you don't, no one else will. And so I don't know that you're I know that you're sick, but I don't know you're this sick. And so unless you say something, no one can do anything to help out. And people want to help out. That's a lesson I'm learning. People want to be accommodating.
They do. And I get so, this is so funny. I get nervous when I message you or something being like, I just can't do it. And it's and you spiral, hello, chronic anxiety. And you spiral. And then you reply to me, Chad, and you're like, babe, don't worry. And I'm like, oh, Chad, I just want to hug.
I feel like I love the relationship we have because it's so whatever you need, whatever like like the netball phrase, here if you need. It's very that. For our American listeners, netball is a sport that is much loved in Australia. And the catchphrase that you often hear on a netball court is here if you need, here if you need. It's not kick it to me. It's like I'm here to support if you need support. But I trust you to make the judgment call yourself. And I love that. And I feel like that's what this relationship is.
Speaking of netball, did you see the Australian men's netball team? They did a pre-show dance. Yeah, they did a pre-show dance to Bye Bye Bye, like sort of our community's anthem.
Great.
And like it was a bit camp. It was really cool. There's this huge outrage about it because people be like, "Oh, what are these male athletes?" And it's just like I love that. I love the teams clap back. They were like, we're living life."
I feel like we've now kind of put our hand up to if we ever do a live tour, we have to do some kind of Bye 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 choreo to like cap off the evening. I'm very scared for all these live shows that I'm now putting my hand up to do dumb things in front of a crowd.
Actually, totally, me too.
We have some fun reviews. Do you know what's fun? I knew about Apple Podcast reviews. I didn't know about Spotify reviews. I've never left a Spotify review, and we had tons. We had tons of really
written reviews.
Yeah, written
I've just
reviews.
left stars. I mean, I've been able to leave one, not my alt accounts, like just like boosting our numbers.
It's just stuff, just like let's get the charts, baby. No, but yeah, there were written reviews. I think they are actually technically called comments, and you can leave comments on individual episodes, which is super cool. So I have a shout out to Nelly, wonderful Nelly. This is everything I needed and more. Talking about bisexuality in such a real, open and unfiltered way has been truly a safe haven for me. Each episode feels like a safe space where my identity is validated, understood, and celebrated. Love how you address the importance of coming out with such sensitivity, recognizing that it's a personal and unique journey. You are helping me connect with my own truth, giving me the strength to face any fears or doubts that may arise. Shut the fuck up. That's the
I am crying.
Ever. I love you, Nelly.
No,
wow.
Nelly.
Oh my gosh. That's like a warm hug, that comment. Thank you so much. That's so thoughtful of you to like feel. Well, one, I'm so grateful that you feel that, but then grateful that you would share that with us in return. That's honestly, thank you.
Oh, that's so nice.
That's wonderful. I want to cry.
I'm sniffling from emotion and from the cold.
And then we had, I actually had someone reach out to me privately, so I'm not going to identify this person in any way. It just says, "Hi, I just wanted to say that I'm loving your podcast, and it's really refreshing to see the POV of a bi man. Both my husband and I are queer, and we sometimes feel like we aren't queer enough to be in the LGBTQ community since we are married. So I appreciate your take and think you're doing great stuff." So thank you to that person. Honestly, like, we record in our homes and then the episodes go out, and it's only through this way, maybe the Facebook group, that we get any kind of return.
And like our mums will tell us, our mums will say it's the best podcast on the planet. Like, thanks, Mum. Yeah. But to hear these from people that we're able to connect with and hopefully make a bit of difference in, it just makes the world. It's so beautiful.
Now I'm sniffly, so we're both just going to be going throughout the whole episode.
Not on our amazing HIV episode. And again, this is actually really an episode about health and hope. And all the exciting times ahead as well we're going to touch into.
Well, if you want to leave a review to make us cry even more than we already are, you can head to Spotify now, apparently, leave comments on individual episodes. You can head to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. We truly appreciate it. We're not trying to do the charts. We just want to hear from you to know that this is meaningful in any way. So thank you so much. Okay, Steve, do you have any bi-lights this week?
Yes. And so I just retrieved through my bi flag door for the people on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. The bi portal. Again, the ghost of Bi Rainbow, the event we co-hosted with the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Business Association, who are looking at changing their name to the Rainbow Business Association to be more inclusive. And if you think about it, to include, it's basically including trans and bi plus people, we stand. But when I was presenting, I stepped down from stage, and a lovely person from one of the craft stalls came up and gave us these bi flag fidget spinners.
Oh, that's fun! Oh my gosh!
And I was like,
like
could you tell?
It's a keyring fidget spinner.
It's a keyring fidget spinner from Spark and Co.
That's fab.
I know. And I was just like, is it that obvious that I need a fidget toy? And they were like, they were sort of kind about it. They were like, oh, everyone needs one. I'm like, thank you so much.
No, you're pacing back and forth and stimming had nothing to do with it.
No. Fiddling with my necklace and my earring constantly wasn't the giveaway.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that. I have a bylight. This is from last week. I think I've said on this podcast before, I'm not the most social person, and I find going out in public quite awkward, especially like a networky vibe. I heard that one of our all-star listeners was going to the local Bi Plus catch-up here in Sydney, and I wasn't going to go, but once I heard that they were going, I made an effort to get out of the house and do the damn thing, and I got to hang out. Steve, if you're listening, this is their name. It's Steve. Hi, we love you. I had the best time. And so it was really fun that my bylight this week is one of our community members. We got to hang out. We got to talk life. We got to talk about being parents, which is, I don't get to do that often. And so, yeah, really, really cool to hang out with you and to spend time with you. And then had someone else at the event and say, hey, I've been listening to the podcast. Love it. So thank you to you as well. So, yeah, it was really wonderful.
Yeah, when the listeners become IRL. But Steve, Steve is part of the furniture. We love Steve. I've known Steve for a while now. God, Steve just gives the best contributions as well. If you join our Facebook group, you'll be able to see some incredible conversations in there. Yeah, and also you can provide us feedback on the podcast.
Yeah, last week we did a bit of an experimental episode and we asked for some feedback and we had some good chats in the Facebook group about that. It's starting to grow. We just ticked over 100 members yesterday morning, which is so exciting. And the chats are really wonderful. People are coming and asking each other for advice and recommendations on how to handle some personal challenges or celebrations that they have. They're sharing resources with each other, like their favorite buy movies or buy books. It's super, super cool. We love to see it. If you want to be a part of the group, the link is in the show notes. And also, it's private. So your mum and your nan or whoever isn't going to see that you're part of the big bisexual party on Facebook. It's a private Facebook group, so you can trust in that. Steve, let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do
World
it.
AIDS Day. What an awesome opportunity to talk about something that is really, really important, something that you've got a long-standing advocacy history with, a personal history with, and I think is actually not World AIDS Day, but the topic of AIDS and HIV is kind of what brought you and I together, working on some campaigns and projects together. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so December 1st has been designated as World AIDS Day since 1988, really at the peak of the AIDS crisis, back when there were no effective treatments available, when we were losing a lot of people. And the way a lot of people talk about it is that we lost an entire generation of queer people due to AIDS, which then the language became HIV AIDS. And these days we talk about HIV. But the 1st of December is World AIDS Day. And interestingly, here in Australia is a real standout in the world of HIV in that we've had probably the best response globally to the HIV pandemic. And we also, it's incredible. And we'll go into that a bit. And so there are two themes because Australia likes to be special. And so we designate our own theme. And I think these are really, really special because the themes of World AIDS Day sort of reflect what's going on in the world of HIV today. And so the global World AIDS Day theme is take the rights path, my health, my rights. And I just think that's, it's an awesome thing because it's calling on people to champion their rights to health and to address the inequalities facing people living with HIV and the inequalities that we face that hinder us ending the pandemic because we have all the tools available. We can end it very soon. It's structural things that are stopping us from doing that.
What I love about Take the Rights Path is that it is a call to action inherently, but not just for the individual. It's also a call to action to organizations and that, like you're saying, there's formal structures of if we were to break this down into a rights issue, it would be so obvious of what the next step would be. So let's take that path. When we kind of think about why things are so slow moving in a lot of these different areas, it's because it hasn't been rights focused. It's been influenced by other things like money and power. So I like this as a theme. Take the rights path. That's cool and very clever. double
Yeah.
entendre.
And like there are lots of different rights that we can look at. In some parts of the world, it's the right to just access medication. It's the right to access healthcare. Here in Australia, because we're a bit further along on our journey, it's we're looking at the right to live a long, healthy life. We have the right to live a life free of HIV stigma. And so sort of globally we can bring that into context. But here in Australia, we have another cool theme. So the World AIDS Day theme in Australia for 2024 is "It Starts With Me." And again, that's a really powerful call to action, not just for people living with HIV, but for HIV negative people as well, to remind us that we each play a role in ending the HIV epidemic. We each have a role in protecting each other from HIV.
Something I learnt when we started working together is the idea and label of HIV negative is one that is misused a little bit. I learnt that unless you have tested and tested recently, you can't reasonably call yourself HIV negative. It is an assumption that you might have about yourself. But I had never tested for HIV before we started working together. And I remember saying I'm HIV negative, and a partner we worked with at the time were like, are you sure? Do you know that? Like, have you ever been told? Has it ever been confirmed? And so I was like, oh, okay, great. Thank you. This is a great conversation. And I think that speaks to that theme for Australia World AIDS Days. It starts with me. It starts with, why doesn't everyone have a bit of a test? And when you're doing your test, why don't you read up about it and read up about why we test and listen to things like today's episode, which is why we're here.
You know what? I'm going to do a little plug there now that we're talking about HIV testing. An incredible service here in Australia for our Australian listeners just opened up, free at-home HIV testing. You can order an HIV test online, and it is sent in a very anonymous packaging to your door. And that's hivtest.au, and it will be sent out to you. So you no longer have to go into a clinic. You no longer have to worry. You can do it at home.
That's amazing. And I saw the massive rollout. I had a friend message me actually that they saw that rollout on Grindr, that they saw the ads popping up everywhere. So it's so cool to, one, not only have it available, but to have some funding to be able to push it out to an audience that needs to hear it and know all about it. So yeah, hivtest.au, that will be in the show notes. But what a cool service. Free anything, free healthcare. Like, wow.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's going to make a huge difference because there are so many barriers to getting HIV tests. It's the scary, and it's very understandable scariness about going into clinic, finding a clinic, especially as bi+ people, finding a clinic where you feel safe, having conversations with people, that sort of stuff. You can do it in the safety and comfort of your own home.
Yeah, and so much of that discomfort is about stigma. It's about maybe an education gap. Maybe you just don't know and you're just curious. The cool thing is the second you take it out of this official, I need to go into a public space to do it, fuck stigma. You're just doing it at home. That's so great. You don't have to talk to anybody. That's so wonderful. It kind of removes 4 or 5 different hurdles to get a result. And really testing is one of the biggest hurdles to ending HIV in Australia.
And one of the things, like from the COVID-19 pandemic, is we all got used to testing ourselves at home. And so if we're testing ourselves for something like COVID-19, why not be testing ourselves for other things? And so people have really taken it on board, which is really exciting.
Steve, I am aware that perhaps the bi+ community would have less of maybe an education or a baseline understanding of what HIV is, what AIDS is, and the language around it. Can we maybe do a bit of a history lesson and dig into kind of what we're talking about at the end of the day?
Yeah, for our listeners, I mean, I never like to assume that people have any knowledge around these things. And also, if you have a lack of knowledge around HIV, it's not your fault. It's that the way that we have set up HIV education has not targeted bi+ people. It's not been effective in reaching out communities very much. And we see that in data as well. We know that bi+ people understand HIV less, understand HIV prevention less, get tested less. And also as a result, we are diagnosed with HIV later in that we live with HIV for a longer period before we get tested.
And have high rates of stigma.
Yes, and have high rates of stigma, high rates of loneliness. We'll go into it. But HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus, and it's a virus that is contracted very often sexually. It is also contracted via blood. So it is contracted via semen, vaginal fluid, blood, and it can be also transferred from mother or childbearing person to their child. That's the basics of it. People often hear about AIDS as well. And AIDS these days is understood as AIDS defining illnesses. So that's a range of different illnesses that you can get if you've lived with untreated HIV for quite a period. Because the way that HIV works in the body is that it basically demolishes your immune system if it's left untreated.
Yeah.
Now,
so AIDS is a life-threatening condition that can be caused by long-standing untreated HIV.
Exactly. And so when we got effective treatments in the mid-90s, that's when we saw far fewer cases of AIDS. And in countries like Australia, cases of AIDS or people with AIDS-related illnesses, or what we also call opportunistic infections, we still see them very rarely, but we do see them because if you've been living with HIV, believing you're HIV negative and haven't been tested, and then you get the test, it's quite remarkable. You can be quite unwell. When you have HIV, you can go through an HIV illness as your body is fighting the virus. But as soon as you go onto treatment, you really see someone's health improve.
Some people can have HIV for quite some time and have no idea, right?
Yes.
Like you could, some people are just quite seasonally sick and might have really large swings in their health and might not notice.
Yes.
And so it can be quite concerning, a lower testing rate. And obviously the Bi Plus community has a lower testing rate. So test is like the number one thing. Just get tested.
Exactly. And that shows the importance of testing. You can't judge your own health as to whether you have HIV. It's only through HIV testing that you can know. And so if you're sexually active, we recommend getting tested for HIV 3 times a year. God, I really have my like informational voice on here.
Yeah, I love that. I'm
we
here
recommend
for it.
this. I'll pick my voice up. Actually,
I don't have many authorities. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
I love that you are that authority. Don't shy away from it.
Totally. And as a disclaimer, everyone, I am Vice President of NAPWA, the National Association of People with HIV Australia. That is the peak national HIV community body. And I've worked in the HIV sector for a number of years in research, in public speaking, and policy. Chad and I, of course, worked on the Bi Plus HIV project at the Sydney Bi Plus Network. And that was the country's first ever Bi Plus specific HIV project. So really awesome stuff. So you can trust what we've got to say here, but also like to tell especially the Bi Plus community, don't let a doctor ever tell you that you're not at risk or that you don't need a test or that,
well, my
you
doctor
don't need
told
to be
me
having
that.
this conversation. Exactly. So
Yeah,
many
my
Bi Plus people
doctor,
are told that.
I said I was bisexual, but I had a cis female partner. And my doctor said, well, that's not necessary. I was like, oh, what? But I've just done this whole health campaign. I know it. Like, I've just gone through the trenches of information, and I was still put off by someone saying that to me.
Yeah.
I was like, because I almost have this what do you call it when someone has authority complex, where I feel bad saying no to someone who is apparently more and more knowledgeable than I am. But I mean, I've since learned a lot of people aren't that learned on the topics of HIV and things that affect our community. So push
exactly.
back.
And if we look at the global theme for World AIDS Day, it's take the rights path. And you do have the right to access an HIV test. You have the right to access HIV prevention. You have the power to be your own advocate, and only you know your risk factors. And especially a lot of Bi Plus people aren't comfortable talking about, say, their sex life, especially if they're closeted. And so if someone goes to their doctor, you can assert your rights. You absolutely can assert your rights. And if your doctor doesn't support your health journey, consider finding another healthcare provider. But you have the right.
Or go to HIVtest.au.
Go to HIVtest.au, absolutely. And for access to PrEP and things like that, we'll talk a bit more about HIV prevention. There are lots of different ways to access that as well.
So, Steve, one of the things that I learnt when we did our campaign together was the idea of you equals you. It's a wonderful little catchphrase, a little chunk of information that you can store and reference very easily. It's a fantastic campaign. Can you run us through what is you equals you?
Absolutely. So I am a person living with HIV. I've been living with HIV for about 6 years now. So I'm going to explain you equals you in the context of my little journey. I was diagnosed in the doctor's office. They gave me a prescription to HIV treatment. I walked downstairs and filled out my script. I walked home with a bottle of pills. I took my first pill, and ever since that day, I have taken one pill a day. And that antiretroviral treatment within 6 weeks meant it resulted in me having an undetectable viral load. And U equals
Wow.
U means undetectable equals untransmittable. That is, you take your treatment, you get an undetectable viral load, and that means you cannot transmit the virus. No way, no how. It just does not happen. It is not scientifically possible because there is literally not enough virus in your body to be transmitted to someone else. That includes by blood, that includes by semen, vaginal fluid, and it also prevents transmission from mother to child.
Honestly, this is like a miracle of modern medicine. This is like there
I wish
aren't
everyone
many
knew about
things.
it.
There aren't many things that match this level of breakthrough in the medical community. Like you said at the top of the episode, HIV and AIDS wiped out an entire cohort generation of people, and still in some parts of the world continues to do so. To even comprehend like that this is available, and like watching there's fantastic documentaries about when HIV was rife through America. I'm thinking How to Survive a Plague is one of my favorites.
Oh my gosh, everyone go watch that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And you watch things like Angels in America, all this, and like the idea that this is available one day, it's very emotional to think about.
It is, and we've come so far.
Yeah, like I think of my uncles. I think of I have a friend whose uncle passed of AIDS. I have a like it was everywhere. It fucking had a chokehold on our community for a generation or two. It fucked us.
Yeah, it really did, and it had a huge ripple effect. If we think about it, gay liberation and queer liberation were going full steam ahead before the mid late 80s when HIV/AIDS came around. And it just put brakes on. The Reagan administration in the United States saw HIV, they called it the gay-related immune disease, I believe it was called GRID. They just refused to fund anything, and there was this huge pushback against queer people that we were effectively endangering the human race. And then that extended further on, especially to bi+ people, and we'll touch on this. Bi+ men were treated as the boogeymen, that we were the ones who brought it into the straight community, even though we now know very, very well and very confidently that HIV was already well within the heterosexual community.
There was the stigma around HIV, like doctors and nurses refused to treat, like you lost your families, like because people were so afraid to just be around you. And to go from that to like I can just pop downstairs and get some drugs the day I find out, fucking hell.
I know. It's so it does feel miraculous, but it's not a miracle, it's science. You touched on it there as well. Like my treatment not only prevents transmission, it means my life expectancy is exactly the same as anyone else. It prevents me from being unwell at all. There's the latent HIV infection can bring on some low-level inflammation. And also we don't know what will happen for me later in life as I age on these treatments. We know that with the earlier treatments, which were far harsher on the body, there are longer-term effects. But, the drugs
like
that I'm on
AZT and stuff like that?
Yeah, or even the early antiretroviral treatments, they get better and better and better. Even the last 5 years, the most advanced HIV drugs that have come in have just got rid of almost all side effects. There were some side effects around bone density and the liver, but those are gone with the most modern medications. So they're really safe. They're really effective. It's so incredible, and I feel so privileged as well. If I was living 30 years ago, I'd be looking at dying. But because I was diagnosed only 6 years ago, I am looking forward to a very long and healthy life where I look after my own health, I look after everyone else's health around me.
I recognize there is some privilege in the timeline that we exist on now that is available to you and to the other people in our community. However, it doesn't solve the problem of stigma. It doesn't solve, like, you still have to journey the fact that I have been diagnosed with this thing. if you're comfortable to do so, could you perhaps walk us through what that diagnosis journey was like for you?
Yeah, so I mentioned before about the journey of getting prescribed medication, taking it, becoming undetectable within 6 weeks. I mean, amazing. Those first 6 weeks, terrifying, because at the time I had a detectable viral load. I could pass HIV on. And you do feel awful, like not awful, unwell, but just like, oh, like I have this. It's a really violating experience, especially because I don't know how I got it. I don't know when I got it, from whom I got it. And so it was really quite shocking. And this is a common story for a lot of people with HIV. None of us went out intending to get it. None of us did anything wrong. The only thing we did was have sex with someone in many cases. Then, of course, there are other cases of transmission from mother-child, as we mentioned, and also through the sharing of needles. But for me, the sin I committed was having sex. And so we all do that. Most of us do that. And
what led you to seek diagnosis? How had you been feeling at the time?
I felt fine. I felt totally fine. I was getting tested 3 times a year. So I do have a window period of knowing when I got it. There's a handful of months period that I can look at. And so that's, again, the importance of getting regular testing, because it was picked up so quickly. I didn't pass it on to anyone else, even when I had a high viral load. It was picked up before I could pass it on to anyone. If I went, so 6
you felt
months,
fine.
12 months,
this was just routine testing,
just routine.
Like, I think that itself is such almost a banner cry, a call to action of why regular testing is so important. You felt fine, and you'd gotten tested minimum or maximum 3 months ago, minimum a day ago. You know what I mean? But you probably didn't get it the day you got tested. I don't know. Like what? Yeah, fair. But like what a great call to action.
Yeah, and I would have felt
you're almost the poster child for regular testing.
Yeah, and even if I did pass it on to someone, like I wouldn't have done it deliberately. It would have been accidental. I still would have felt, it would feel awful. It would feel awful, and I actually empathize a lot with the person that gave me HIV, and that they probably didn't know they had HIV themselves. And so I really hope that person was able to find the care that they needed and have been able to get onto treatment. I don't have any ill will at all towards the person, because I know the feeling of what it's like to have HIV, and it is just a shock, and it's an awful feeling. And I remember walking home with that bottle after the pharmacy, and it was a rainy day, and I had an umbrella in my hand. The rain had stopped, so I had it closed down. And I remember dropping it about 5 times because I just kept on spacing out. I just could not process the information.
Wow. And
I walked through the front door of my share house, and I just screamed and just collapsed on the sofa. And my housemates come running in, and they're like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, I just got diagnosed with HIV. And they were just like, "Oh, come here." And they just bundled me up with love. And that was the first day of the rest of my life. Yeah.
I guess it doesn't matter where you got it from, right?
No, it doesn't. Of course
it's almost irrelevant, and I think dwelling on that type of thing is maybe a distraction from the taking care of yourself that you can do. And I think it is almost an inherited position to take, that like somebody's to blame, like that was the narrative for a long time. Yeah, but there's no blame. No. Like, people are doing
I don't blame the person that gave me at all.
Right? Like there's millions of people having sex, right? Just one particular community has happened to have a higher sexual networks. There's no blame. It's just a fact of life.
And every person living with HIV has fielded the questions of, how did you get it? And these are questions that are used to sort us, right? Sort us into the naughty or the nice. Did you deserve it or did you not deserve it? Or like, it's how people want to categorize us. And I get the same feeling when I'm asked that question as when I'm asked the question as a bi man. What's your preference? Surely you have a preference. Like, to what degree do I think you're really straight or gay? And with the HIV, to what degree do I think you're good or bad? And all of these questions just need to be thrown out the door. It's like, it actually doesn't matter. Your curiosity does not need to be satiated in this moment. I will share it with you if I really want to. It has no impact on anything, and just treat us as people.
Yeah, amen. Steve, you talked a little bit about treatment. So obviously we have ART, which with antiretroviral therapy, but I've seen some news of advancements and potential new treatments in this space, and an injectable of some kind. Is that right?
Yeah. So I take a pill every day, right? Currently available here in Australia, injections, and they're similar drugs. An injection that you can get every 3 months. So you get an injection 4 times a year, and you're fully protected. You get the full level of treatment, and you cannot pass the virus on. They have 6-monthly long injections as well being trialed. So twice a year, and these are incredible. The way that they trialed it was in sub-Saharan African communities, people who live very far away from urban centers. Mainly women and girls were given these treatments. People who are really highly stigmatized from family, religious groups, that if there were to be an indication that they were HIV positive, they would be rejected. And so if you only have to go into town twice a year to do the shopping, in inverted commas, but really get your treatment, this will change lives. Then we're looking at once yearly injections. Then, are we going to look at once every 5-year injections, or are we going to end up with one single injection, which looks like a cure? It's incredible, because every year we're seeing advances.
That's insane. That's so
Isn't
cool.
it?
I probably need to temper my language a little bit. I'd just say insane after everything. But that's actually quite remarkable.
It is.
And so obviously that's treatment, but like really one of the big conversations around HIV is prevention. And this is when we were talking before about that it starts with me, right? And I feel like prevention is a big part of that. There is something that everyone can do in their daily activity if they're sexually active to do that. What does that look like?
Well, there are sort of 2 ways you can look at it. And so as a person living with HIV, I really like to put front and center in prevention the U equals U message as well. Because I know that I'm living with HIV. I know that I'm on treatment and I can't pass it on. So effectively, I'm the safe bet. If you want to avoid getting HIV, sleep with someone who has it and is on treatment, because they're not going to give it to you.
I remember clocking that when we were doing that campaign. I was like, oh, it's kind of a slay.
Yeah, it's quite a confronting message. If you want to avoid getting HIV, sleep with someone who knows they have it and is on treatment. But it's a very true statement. But then I love, so there's a shared responsibility model in that people living with HIV like myself, we're doing what we need to do. People who are HIV negative also need to do something. And also, I'm all about autonomy as well. I don't want to really rely on anyone else. I want to rely on myself. I want to know that I'm doing something, because I know that I'm taking an action. And there are different actions you can take in HIV prevention. So, of course, we know about condoms. There's also like strategic positioning.
Let's assume we don't know about condoms, right?
Condoms. Latex condoms available at many shops. They are a physical barrier that you pop over your penis, and it prevents HIV transmission, and it also prevents a number of other STIs, and it also prevents pregnancy. And they are very effective. On top of that, of course, I keep on saying of course. Sorry, everyone. Like, I talk about this stuff every day. But I do understand.
What you do.
But I do understand that this can be really, really new information, especially some more groundbreaking stuff. And so
especially the bi+ community, I feel like, again, like the HIV discourse, the marketing, the messaging, all that kind of stuff doesn't reach our community. And so I feel like I'm going to edit it out every time Steve says, of course.
Thank you.
Because we're, like, this is, for some of us, brand new.
It is. It really is. Also, the knowledge that we're going to be giving you all today, don't hold it on to yourselves. Pass it on. Pass on the knowledge, because we can all be educators.
Actually, that was a part of our campaign. I forgot about that. Icebreakers. We made a point in our campaign to not only give stats and information, but then also frame it as an icebreaker. Like, did you know this stat? Did you know U equals U? Because it's the conversation that changes lives.
We've got Christmas coming up. At your family Christmas table, if you want to give an interesting fact or something miraculous, some good news, tell your family about U equals U. Tell people Tell your family about the fact that people living with HIV cannot pass on HIV because of treatment, and that we are within the grasp of ending the HIV pandemic. That will, you will see, it's not a weird conversation. You'll see people, their reaction, they'll go, what? That's incredible.
Just make it a good news story.
It is a good news story.
That's great.
So back on HIV prevention, we've talked about sort of physical barriers like condoms, and then we have a more modern technology, biomedical prevention. And so that is PrEP, PrEP, which stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis. And pre-exposure prophylaxis is a medication, and it's a medication that prevents an HIV negative person from getting HIV. And a fun fact with that, it is the same or similar medication to what I take. And so the medication that we use to treat HIV, is the same medication used to prevent transmission in HIV negative people. So
which one's cheaper?
So very luckily, we like to say here that Sydney, Australia is the best place in the world to have HIV because our medication is free. We have 1 million services. We have the highest rates of treatment. We have the highest rates of undetectable viral load in the world. But then in many places...
Talk about another good news story. Far out. That's great.
I know. But this is a place of extreme privilege. You only need to look to the United States, let alone Asia, South America, Africa, to see places where if there aren't insurance barriers, there are access barriers. There are so many barriers to accessing HIV treatment and also on accessing PrEP.
Steve, can I ask, are there any services that you know of where we as a community could donate or fund so that they can provide those services to other communities? Is there anything like that that exists?
So there are really large funds. So there's the Bill and Melinda Gates Fund and the Global Fund to fight HIV, malaria, and hepatitis. I always forget. They sometimes latch on a new virus onto it. But there are large global funds that governments fund. There's UN AIDS. And so these are really high level things that have the resources. If you want to donate money or time, find a local organization. Find an organization near to you that provides services for people living with HIV, that provide HIV prevention services. It's the grassroots organizations that need our support.
Can you think of any Australian or New South Wales specific?
Absolutely. So you can donate to, here in Australia, organisations like the Bobby Goldsmith Foundation. It's an organisation I'm an ambassador for, and they provide extraordinary services for people living with HIV. They help them get to medical appointments. They help them with financial planning. They help them find stable housing. They provide social services. People living with HIV experience extraordinarily high rates of loneliness. And so if you donate to local charities like the Bobby Goldsmith Foundation, you're actually putting that money into services that really support people. And if you want to support other grassroots organisations, there are organisations like PrEP Access Now, another Australian-based organisation. And they're an organisation that helps people access PrEP. Now, PrEP is broadly available here in Australia, but there are issues around people that migrate here or that visit here where it makes it more difficult to access PrEP. And so PrEP Access Now enables broad access. And also when we have PrEP shortages, which
we just had one, didn't we?
Yeah, we just had one.
Yeah.
And so, large organizations, large pharmacies lost a lot of their supply chain for a few weeks, but smaller, more nimble organizations like PrEP Access Now were able to fill the gap and play a really vital role in keeping people linked in with their PrEP coverage. And so that's pan.org.au, PrEP Access Now and PAN. We love a bi+ reference. I don't think it was deliberate. Again, a disclaimer, I co-founded that organization and didn't realize until later that, PAN. That's a really...
See, you and I have talked about previously that it's this bizarre kind of cosmic irony that you were diagnosed with HIV. Like the work that you had done before your diagnosis to bring PrEP into Australia before it was regulated, before the trials had gone through, was incredible. And through PrEP Access Now, that was made available and sourcing those biomedical resources.
Yeah.
Did that play on your mind when you were diagnosed? Were you like, are you fucking kidding me? What the fuck?
Yeah, of course. So PrEP, of course, is an extraordinarily effective HIV preventative. has over 99.9% efficacy. Everywhere in the world we've seen PrEP rolled out, we have seen HIV rates plummet. It is one of the tools, along with U equals U, that will end the HIV pandemic. And so it is extraordinarily powerful. And it is something that if you are sexually active, especially if you are sexually active with men who have sex with men, which is our technical terms. But if you, say if you're a woman and you're sleeping with bi plus men, definitely consider getting onto PrEP, or at least consider a conversation around it, because it's something that can empower you to prevent HIV transmission. Now, I worked in HIV prevention for in PrEP and HIV prevention for many years, and I myself was on PrEP at the time that I was diagnosed with HIV, and so, yep, cat's out of the bag. Thank you, Chad. I was the seventh person in the world to be diagnosed with HIV while on PrEP, and yes, I was like, the universe is playing a fucking joke on me. This is ridiculous. One of the main feelings when I was diagnosed with HIV wasn't actually really about myself, because I knew that I'd be okay. I knew about treatment. I had lots of pos friends. I knew that I'd be all right. It was actually like, oh my gosh, I really don't want people to worry about PrEP, because what happened to me is so extraordinarily rare. 99.9% efficacy. I was one of the unlucky 0.00 somethings. I'd probably go a bit I am a bit crazy. But I'd probably go quite crazy if I let it sort of hang over me. But I don't, because I know that my life is going to be totally fine. And this is what I tell people if they're afraid of getting an HIV test, if they don't want to know about their HIV status. It's like, you're going to be okay. You will be fine. I'm fine. I have lots of reasons to be angry. I have lots of reasons to be upset, but why? What's the point?
I love your thought of like, I didn't want people to think differently about PrEP. It's incredibly noble. And with all the work that you've done, I think you were right to not be scared. Like you said, like, it's like, I knew what was available to me. What an incredible position to be in. I imagine a lot of people who do receive a diagnosis don't have any of that information, or at least not as much as you had. Yeah, what an incredibly noble thing to think.
Well, I mean, it's like, I knew the numbers. I just had to tell people, I'm like, what happened to me will not happen to you. We know for a scientific fact that it is, that it works, that it's effective. And I don't want to derail conversations around it either. It's just like, it's just something that happened to me. It's something very personal, really, as well, at the end of the day. And but it is something that I'm happy to share with as well, because one of the things, and also when I tell people that I got it, even though I was on PrEP, and people will then say, "Oh, so you didn't deserve it," and I'm just like, no, that is
deserve. What the fuck are you talking about?
Exactly. Or like, oh, well, you were at least doing the right thing. And it goes back to what we were saying before, and that people want to designate, different people living with HIV as the good and the bad. And I'm like, well, no, none of us wanted to get it. Almost all of us got it by accident. I got it by accident. It's absolutely no different.
So we have PrEP, right? But one of the things with PrEP is most people who take it engage in perhaps a more active sex life than those who don't take it, right? So because there's a bit of a ramp up period, and then there's like a continuing daily dosage. So there are options for those who may not have such a regular sex life, but do want to be cautious. And let's say you get a bit hot and heavy with someone, you don't want to be like, hey, wait a second, I got to give me a week. You know what I mean? Like, so what are our options if we do happen to engage in sex and we still want to be as calculated, I guess, or as covered as possible?
All right. We've got a two-pronged approach with this. So with PrEP, it can be a daily medication, but we also have on-demand PrEP, and it's the same medication, but you take it if you say don't have a very active sex life, but for when you do have sex, you want to be protected from HIV and you're planning on having that sex. We have on demand, and that's also known as 211 PrEP. And so it's called 211 because you take 2 pills before you have sex, so a few hours before you have sex. So say you're planning on doing the hokey pokey on Friday night, you take 2 pills in the morning, And then you take one pill the day after, and then one pill the day after that. So you're taking 4 pills in total, and you are fully protected for that Friday night. If you decide to have sex on the Saturday night and the Sunday night, you're having a big weekend, you just continue to take PrEP over that Monday and that Tuesday and say that Wednesday, and you're still protected. Wow. Yeah, it's extraordinary.
So 211 is the other thing we're going to try and get into the minds of everyone, not just you equals you, because 211, it's pretty phenomenal. What if I'm not that calculated with my sex life? What if I'm not planning? What if I just happen to go out for some drinks with someone? They're a bit cute, and we do the hokey pokey.
And you do the hokey pokey. Well, if you do the hokey pokey and you believe that you've been exposed to HIV, we have post-exposure prophylaxis. Now, PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, you take it before the act. Post-exposure prophylaxis, you're taking it after the act. Now, you can call up your local emergency. You can let them know, I think I've been exposed to HIV. And if you take, it's very similar medication to PrEP, and also, of course, similar to my treatment. And within 72 hours, if you take this medication, and then it goes on for a little while as well, they get you to take the medication for a little while, there are very, very high chances that you will be fully protected from acquiring HIV. So post-exposure prophylaxis, contacting your local emergency is a really, really, really great option.
That's a great tip. I didn't know that would be the first protocol. That's a good tip.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to call them up. Don't be afraid to call them up. And they will ask you a few questions. They will look at your risk factors, things like that. Again, you can advocate for yourself. If you really firmly believe that you've been exposed to HIV, you can advocate for yourself. But they may also be able to assuage some of your fears. So if they ask you about some of the things that you did, and they say, oh, well, actually, HIV isn't transmitted that way. We don't believe that you're at risk of getting HIV. Then perhaps that conversation
foot stuff
will
is like it's not a transferable medium.
Have we talked about foot stuff on this show before? I feel like
not yet, but welcome to season 2.
We need to bring foot stuff in more often. I just have this there are these memes going around of people very legitimately and awesome sell their foot photos online, and I'm just immensely jealous.
I know. I joke to my partner all the time, like, babe, I'm like 3 fucking days or one one bad client away from selling feet pics.
I am this close to footfinder.com. I am skating on thin ice. I am getting these witchy toes out. These hairy.
The thing is, I've got good cameras. I've got lighting. I can even do some film photography. Like I could do this. This is my calling.
Really artistic foot photos. All right, everyone. If you want to see Chad's feet, I'm throwing him in the deep end here. If you want to see Chad's feet, put in a request and we can set up a shoot.
If you ever are on Footfinder and you recognize the podcast background, don't at me.
We can even get your toes painted in the bicolor flags. That'd be amazing.
Okay. Now, I discovered today that we aren't incredibly vocal about our newsletter. We talk about our Facebook group a lot because it's great and it's really active. It's like a 2-way conversation. But we have a newsletter that goes out every single week to remind you, hey, we've got new episodes, to ask for feedback on things and get some behind the scenes content as well. So if you are not subscribed to the newsletter, head to the show notes. There'll be a link there and you can sign up for the newsletter. It's good stuff, and I think you'll enjoy it. One of the reasons I love a newsletter is because we really have no control over social media. We don't own social media or our likes. And so I come from a marketing background, and I have seen so many people lose their YouTube channels or get their Instagrams banned. And because we play in the space of sexuality and queer rights, it is almost an inevitability that someone is going to start doxing our accounts or reporting the content that we post just because they disagree with what we talk about. In the event that we lose a social media platform, the only real thing we have left is a newsletter. No one can take that away from us. So it's a bit of a safeguard for this community. We're all trying to kind of connect together. And so jumping on there means that no matter what happens, we can still connect, still forge forward together. So yeah, we'll see you there.
Now, we touched briefly on stigma before, the way that we talk about HIV here in Australia is a bit different to the rest of the world because
Sure.
we've sort of already achieved what used to be the goal. We've achieved the goal of getting the vast majority, I'm talking 98% of people living with HIV on treatment and undetectable. I mean, that's effectively everyone. It's extraordinary. And so what
can
we
we
now
pause
do,
on that for a second? That's
Yeah.
wild.
yeah,
Oh, so we talked about the effectiveness, but what you're talking about is getting those who are HIV positive to know that they're HIV positive and then on treatment. You're saying we're at 98%?
yes.
Does that number include all HIV positive folks, including all types of acquisition types?
Yeah, it does. It does. And which is why when I say you can quite confidently have here in New South Wales in Australia, you can have sex with someone who is HIV positive and know you're not going to get it from them. That's because almost every single one of us physically cannot pass it on to you. It's only people who think they're HIV negative.
That's exceptional.
It is.
Like, wow. There's almost like no other medical field. Well, I'm talking out my ass now, but I would imagine there's no other medical field where that is the case, that 98% of people who have the flu know that they have the flu, or 98% of people who have like chickenpox know that they have chickenpox. Like, that's wild.
Isn't it? And it is a testament to not only the way our services are delivered, but it's a testament to how people living with HIV, we are responsible. We take charge of our health. We care about our health and we care about others. You know, the fact that we're at that 98% number is a testament to that. So we've achieved that goal. And so we look at what's next. And we realize that even though our health is good, our health and well-being is not necessarily good. And that's largely because of the impacts of HIV stigma. And that looks like internalized HIV stigma, rejection from friends, rejection from partners. I'm still regularly rejected by people because of my HIV status, even though I cannot pass HIV on to them. It's poor treatment. It's discrimination in the workplace. It's insurance discrimination. There are 100 countries in the world that over 100 countries in the world that I legally cannot enter simply because I have HIV.
Wow.
Who cares if I'm undetectable or not? They just will not let me in.
Wow.
And so,
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't I know that? Wow.
I know. And this is the thing with people. A lot of people would look at sort of these statistics and be like, oh, it's a good news story. Like, oh, we don't have to worry about HIV anymore. But we certainly do, because HIV now impacts us in ways other than our health. And so the way that we look at it is improving the quality of life of people living with HIV, our ability to live whole and happy lives. Because when we look at statistics of HIV positive people or people living with HIV, we experience huge rates of loneliness, huge rates of stigma and discrimination, of course. And then this just has flow-on effects to many, many other areas of our lives. And so we really care about supporting people living with HIV, which is why we have to not take our foot off the brake because we're doing so well. We actually have to put our foot on the accelerator because here in Australia, there's 30,000 odd of us, and I plan on living a long and full life, and I'll need support for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful reminder that what we take for granted, perhaps, that like, oh, that medication's free, might not always be the case. Like no. that is not a guaranteed thing for you want to live another 50, 60, 70 years of life. There's a lot of elections. That's a lot of global unrest. That's a lot of supply chain. You know, like that needs to be important forever.
And there are a lot of people that would look at that and say, well, these people did something wrong. Why should we pay for it? And we pay for it because when we don't have to pay for our medication and we're supported by the government, that means we look after our health. That means we hit that 98% undetectable number. And that means we stop a pandemic.
It's also so much cheaper than to not pay for it. Like,
exactly.
There are consequences to not paying for it.
You pay this amount up front and you're saving a lot of money down the track. And so, but there are many people that would have it a different way.
Of course.
And so we always have to be cautious of that.
What does it look like? Obviously, this is the Give It To Me Bi podcast. Is there a unique experience for bi plus people experiencing HIV, the understanding of HIV, how HIV manifests in the world of the bi plus community?
Yeah, definitely. So, as we all understand as bi plus people, we are typically under researched and lack visibility, and we are misunderstood. But we do have a fair bit of data telling us the experiences of bi plus people living with HIV. There's some local research here, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. So, bisexual, and it's mostly around bisexual men because that's the largest cohort. But bisexual men living with HIV report greater levels of self-stigma, worse self-image, poorer emotional well-being. They report less social support, fewer connections to the LGBTQ plus community, which is a broader experience for all bi plus people, and also fewer connections to people living with HIV. And so that's one thing I noticed as well when I was diagnosed, is that there are no services that are catered for me. I had to attend services with gay men that were run by and organized by gay men. And, if I have a female partner or I have an experience outside of the gay community, is that information, the information's good, but we want to hear from peers. We know the magic around support from peers.
Totally.
Yeah, we know that the unique experience of bisexual men living with HIV were often marginalized and incorporated into the broader MSM, which means men who have sex with men, or sort of, the gay and bisexual men umbrella, even though we have vastly different experiences. Because, I'll look at the example of HIV disclosure. It looks really different for me explaining to someone that I'm living with HIV, whether, it's a different experience between whether I'm telling a gay man or a straight woman. They're two very, very different experiences because there's different base knowledge. There's different generational trauma. There's different, different interactions. And so
I would probably say a straight cis woman of our generation would probably know this much about HIV and their responsibility in HIV. And I dare say that a gay cisgendered male of our generation knows this much.
Yeah.
Like
because
that, it's
the information's
almost
targeted at them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
But do you want to hear a good news story? It's sort of a good and a bad news story. So, I came out as bi a couple of months before I was diagnosed with HIV. Knowing what you just said then, knowing that gay men know lots, and knowing that straight women, for example, or women in general, know less, meant, okay, I'm just going to stick with what seems safe. And it really, really delayed my development as a bi man. It really kept me from being able to spread my wings and be the person and live the life that I wanted to live. Until, again, and I say this all the time, I'm not going to sit in life's waiting room. I bit the bullet and I said, you know what, I want to give it a hot go. I just want to be able to live the life that I want to live. And so, with gay men, I'd experience some rejection, then I'd experience a lot of acceptance. I met a lot of other men living with HIV as well, and so that's always just a breeze. It's the same thing as like a bi person dating another bi person. You're like,
you get it.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
You get it. And I will tell you what.
You get it.
You got it too. I get it. And then there's just immense fear about telling anyone else. And that fear kept me back. I'll tell you what, every time I've told, say, a woman about my HIV status, even if they've got really low knowledge, that means that I am the source of knowledge. And there are a lot of people saying like, oh, I don't want to do the labor of education. I don't, it's not my responsibility for other people to know. But I take a different approach. I'm like, you know what? This is an opportunity to change someone else's life and also improve my own. And so I value those interactions. And when they're an open book and they don't have any sort of preconceived notions around HIV, when I tell someone who hasn't heard about you because and I tell them, I'm a person living with HIV, but I'm on treatment and can't pass it on to you because I'm on this incredible treatment. They go, wow, that's incredible. Can we have sex now? And I'm like, absolutely.
It's almost like it's almost a part B to the consent conversation. It's like, oh, hell yeah, let's go. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And it's
I was going to ask about the labor of educating people because like I can see why people would not want to do that. It could be a burden. It could also put people off. There's so much wrapped up in it. And I pontificate that there'll be many people with HIV that aren't proud, right? Aren't pumped to have that conversation. And
Absolutely.
so bringing it up right before you have sex, I imagine isn't the funnest thing. Steve, I wanted to ask, I know that there have been some changes to legislation about disclosure. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So before we jump into this, look at the rules about HIV disclosure in your jurisdiction. So here in Australia, it's different state by state. And so I'll talk about where I live. And so here, I don't have to tell anybody about my HIV status because I have an undetectable viral load. The law really takes a pro-science approach here in that I do not have to tell anyone because I am not a risk to anyone. And so every time I tell someone my HIV status, it's a choice. It's not an obligation. It's something that I'm sharing with you because I want to share my life with you, whether it be for the next hour or for the rest of my life. It's something I want to, my HIV status doesn't impact your health or my health, but it is a big part of my life. And so it's something that I share with people. And so for HIV positive people here in New South Wales, we are under no obligation to tell people. With that,
is that largely the same across the country or no?
It's a little bit different in different places.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Victoria have updated their laws, but I believe a positive person has to tell them their HIV status unless a condom is used. If a condom is used, there doesn't have to be a discussion. But that might have been updated.
Again, because check your local. Yeah.
Check your local. And I know that areas in the United States, no matter what, if you're HIV positive, you have to tell someone your status. The reason why we have these things is we have these laws, and why here in Australia we have more modern laws. It's because we open ourselves not just to the risk of being stigmatized, rejected, and discrimination, but we also open ourselves up to the risk of violence. We open ourselves up to the risk of a really, really negative reaction from someone, especially in a vulnerable space. If you are alone in a room with someone and you don't know how they're going to react, at least here in Australia, we're under no obligation to put ourselves at risk. But in other places we are. And that means a lot of positive people just won't even take the risk, won't even enter a room with someone.
That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
That pro-science approach to that change, because that's only a relatively recent change here. Is that correct?
It's within the last several years, but it almost takes on the older laws in that HIV disclosure only needs to happen if necessary precautions aren't taken. So it uses that precaution. We have recently taken that as you equals you is sort of the ultimate precaution, and so we don't need to disclose our HIV status. Again, I prefer to share my HIV status because of it's HIV. I mean, if you Google me, HIV pretty much comes up straight away. So it's not, I can't really hide from it. I'm also on a podcast talking about being positive, so I can't really hide from it.
It's funny. I've had to write bios for you for different media stuff, and I just have to Google you and transcript from that video. It's a date would have very low hurdles to find out information about you.
Yeah. But for people who aren't open about their HIV status, I know people who have been blackmailed. I know people who have been treated horribly, and sort of I find freedom and sort of a lower risk in being open about my HIV status.
Kind of reclaiming the narrative from somebody. Yeah. Steve, you mentioned before that you came out as bisexual right around the same time that you discovered your HIV positive status. And I mean, what a fucking year for you.
Wasn't it? 2018 sucked.
Yeah. So I want to ask, from that point in time, you became very active in the HIV sector of championing by experiences, by voices, and the availability of services and messaging for bi+ people. What changes have you seen? What was the state of it when you came into it, and where is it now? What do you see for the future?
That started with absolutely nothing, and it's quite extraordinary. We look back at the first ever bisexual conferences. There was one in Perth in 1992, and about half of the resolutions were related to HIV, saying bi+ people need to be, or the language then bi people had to be part of the response to HIV, that we need to have services tailored to us and our partners. Now, none of that really eventuated because the priorities were elsewhere, and it was a chaotic time as well. It was a really chaotic time as well. But very pleased to say that that's all changing. And from just a few years ago when there was nothing, there was no representation of bi plus people really in the HIV scene, to now we just launched the Bi Plus Positive Advocacy Network. It is a national network of bi plus HIV positive people, no matter your gender, no matter where you are, no matter your experience. If you are a bi plus positive person, you can join us. And I'm the convener of that network. I have all of my bi-pos babies in there. And if any of them are listening here, I love you all. You can join our network. You know, we do advocacy, but we also do community. We can connect you with other bi-plus people where you are. And so
That's awesome.
you can contact us, BIPAN, BIPAN at NAPWA, napwha.org.au. That's BIPAN at napwa.org.au if you want to link up
That's
with other
amazing.
people like you. Also,
Obviously, you snuck in the BIPAN into the name. That's very clever.
A shout out to the fact that Bi Plus Positive Advocacy Network just happened to spell out BIPAN, which
you're going to run out of options for the next 12 things you start.
you should have heard the squeal that I made when I was like, because I was looking at the other networks. We've got Latinx networks, we've got positive Asian networks, and I'm like, you know, advocacy. I'm like, the Bi Positive Advocacy.
And we love a pun.
And I'm not even going to lay claim to it because it's my Bi Plus 4 beers that have given me the tools to suck out a pun from the thin air.
That's great. Yeah. It is like such a thing.
It's a learned skill as well.
You know what? We actively didn't do it for the podcast name. Like my previous podcast idea, I wanted it to be called Bifocal. I bought the domain and everything. I was like, oh, cool. What a good pun. And then I couldn't escape. Every episode, every conversation I have with community, something is a pun. I was like, I love this for the community, but we've got to do something that is not a pun. We had to fight against it to give it to me by.
Totally. And I mean, if you think about it as well, we use the bi colors, but our main color is pretty much orange because we just went, no, you know what? We actually need to do something a little
Fought
different.
against that as well. I love the colors. I love all the other podcasts, but like, we need to be distinct. We need to break out of this a little bit as a community.
Totally. Also, I'm not sure if I've mentioned on the pod yet, but orange in the hanky code, orange is, so, you know, red is for fisting. Brown, I'm not going to tell you. Blue is for sex, and orange is the anything goes color, which I just think is so appropriate.
Yeah, anything, anytime. And obviously it depends on what pocket, because I think the other pocket is nothing. It's like either anything goes or no.
We love our asexual bi plus fam.
Yeah, it's great.
We've got you covered.
I'm not sure if we should do a hanky code episode, but I love the hanky code. It's such a underground, we will strive regardless of how much you force us underground types of communication.
Oh, there's so much interesting queer history that we can cover. Have you heard of Polari or Polari?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the underground queer language that mostly gay men developed 200 years ago. Wild. Let's cover that.
That's
speaking of puns and secret language, you can't demand someone's HIV status unless in certain circumstances, and you certainly can't tell other people. It's very illegal to disclose someone else's HIV status.
Which I stumble on because I talk about you and our experience as
I'm public, so it's fine. It's public knowledge. We've got a slang. We say, "Oh, are you in the court of Henry IV?"
I love that. Henry IV is so funny.
HIV, Henry IV.
Yeah. I love that I got it straight away. The other day, someone said to us, HIV, HIV moustache, and I didn't get it. I was like, what's HIV?
So, by the way, these puns, you have to be allowed by a positive person to say these things or be in a safe space. Please don't go running around using HIV jokes or puns.
Yes,
but
actually.
yes, we had a friend refer to a HIV stash. Very problematic. Please, no one ever use that term. But it's
I
sort
can
of
cut that out if you want me to cut that out.
No. But there is also a movement amongst the positive community of us reclaiming certain things and reclaiming imagery that was once used to haunt us and using it as a sign of strength.
I don't know what it is, and maybe you might have some insight to it, but for some reason, this is a topic that coming into my queerness, I just felt so emboldened by, so drawn to. Like all of my favorite media is about this. Like Rent, my favorite musical of all time, is about HIV/AIDS. Like How to Survive a Plague, my favorite documentary. Like I don't know why I get very emotional about it. Like it's like maybe it's a justice complex, like we were so wronged. Like the Reagan thing, like it feels so much loss, unnecessary loss, and maybe that's why I'm so drawn to it. But just hearing you do that acknowledgement, like I'm fucking crying. Like,
And I get that question as well. Like when I was negative, like why did I start PrEP Access now? Like why was I fighting so hard in HIV? And I really don't know. Like you, it's just a feeling. There was just some, I don't know, spiritual call to action of there are wrongs here, there are solutions here. We need to do something. I can do something. That also goes again to this year's Australian theme of it starts with each of us. It starts with me, in that we are all powerful. We all have something that we can do.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
How did you know when you started PrEP Access now? How did you know that you could do that? So as a person, I'm very ignorant when it comes to anything medical. I have been very fortunate that for a large majority of my life, I've not dealt with many sicknesses, illnesses, injuries. I have family members who would have the opposite experience, but I wouldn't reasonably go, oh, I can access drugs direct from manufacturers overseas, ship them into the country, and put them in the hands of people who need. Like, how did you even make and connect those dots?
I don't even know. We looking back on it, it's like we were bloody ballsy. One of our co-founders, I believe, was buying other medication from this online supplier.
Right, okay.
Found a really cheap online manufacturer, and then we had to establish the supply chain network between the manufacturer, the online pharmacy, and then with consumers. And then we had to navigate the importation scheme around protected drugs. And none of us had a medical or pharmaceutical background. We had a rough idea of what we were doing, and we're just like, we're not even sure if what we're doing is legal. And then we checked it, we're like, okay, it is legal. You know, our proudest achievement was, at the time, there was a trial on in Victoria. It had about 150 people on PrEP at the time, which is extraordinary considering we have hundreds of thousands of people on it now. And we looked at that and we just thought, that's wrong. We know that it's that we can do better than that. And so while the government had a 150-person trial, we had about 2,000 people in our books. And that embarrassed them enough to go, okay, we probably need a trial with 5,000 people. And they had 5,000 and then 10,000. And then they went, all right, everyone, just take it.
I am fucking obsessed with that story because it really speaks to the just do a thing. Like you don't overthink, oh my gosh, we can't do that. None of us have a medical background. Who gives a fuck? Like, look into it. What's the best that could happen, right? Like we always think, oh, what's the worst that could happen? But what's the best that could happen? You could end a plague. Is using the wording of that documentary. I know that's a loaded term. You could put a fucking dent in this thing. That's incredible. And you're just so called to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just sort of, you make the right networks at the right time, and you just, and you keep your eye on the prize. And effectively our goal was to no longer exist. We wanted the government to step up because we knew that there are systems and bodies that had a responsibility to do this. And a lot of people, like in sort of high positions in these organizations, were encouraging us. They're like, no, keep going because we agree with you. A lot of people would sort of be precarious of like, you know, oh, I don't want to come up against these giants or anything. And it's like, actually, you know, most people want the same goal. And what you don't see behind the scenes are a lot of people's hands are tied behind their backs. And so if
red tape and different power structures. Yeah.
All sorts. And you can actually find if you're an advocate, there are old school advocates in these organizations who support you. And so you can go right ahead and they'll support you.
And the cool thing about that is that you took a stand and you pushed back against the powers that be. But and forgive me, I didn't know you then, but were you cunty about it, or were you very hey, we're taking a stand, we're doing a thing, or did you try to rub people the wrong way? What was your tact?
It was sort of, we wanted to stay in our own lane. We wanted to go, we're not going to let anything distract us from our goal. There will be people saying that what we're doing is irresponsible. There were even people saying oh, it's not proven, even though the science was completely in. People would say the official trial only has 150 people. How do you know? And it's because we have all of the science to back it up. And we would also say this, if it is going to be in everyone's hands in 2 years' time, why not do it right now?
I have a crush on Steve of what year is it? 2015? What a cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, but what a fucking cool thing to have done. It's a cool way to affect change. You force their hand to speed it up. You also kind of force their hand about price as well. You're getting it from a cheap source, and so you price it at a certain point. So no one's going to charge more than that. You know, and they're not going to go, oh yeah, come get it for double the price. Well, I can just go to Steve. So that you are setting this standard, that's fucking wild. Have you ever thought about that? The ripple effects of what that would have done? How many people you've helped forcing the government's hand to do that?
Totally. Well, I mean, the fact that we're further ahead than anywhere else in the world in ending the HIV pandemic, we're looking at, really amazing thing to hear for our listeners is that Australia is looking at effectively ending HIV transmissions, virtually eliminating HIV by 2030. And we're very close to it.
Whoa.
Very close to it. And one of those things is the huge and early uptake of PrEP.
Yeah. Wow. Insane.
Yeah.
With the ending of HIV on the possible horizon, what's next to get there? What does that entail?
As we're seeing with the global theme of this year's World AIDS Day, take the rights path, my health, my right. We are really looking at how individuals and the discrimination we face as different communities impacts how we are going to end HIV. And it's a very firm and very true statement that we will actually not end HIV until we end biphobia, because biphobia is a limitation in people accessing treatment. It's a limitation in people speaking to their sexual partners. We know for a fact that being in a closet limits your ability to prevent HIV transmission. We are seeing lives and relationships destroyed because of biphobia, and because of that, we also see HIV transmissions in their wake. And that's not to blame individuals, it's to blame the systemic biphobia, interpersonal biphobia. And so we will not end the HIV pandemic until we end biphobia. We will not end the pandemic until we end sexism and misogyny. We won't end it until we end racism. All of these structural forms of discrimination will be the huge factors in determining whether or not we end the pandemic properly and on a global scale.
Steve, can I just say, I feel like this has been a fucking banger of an episode. The same way that when we worked together a few years ago, that on the first national Bi Plus HIV campaign, it is so cool to work with you again on something that is Bi Plus specific, HIV specific, that can become a resource to people that might still not have access to services, but could listen in their car on the way to work, or to kind of listen to before bed, and know that there's hope in this topic. This isn't doom and gloom anymore. There is hope on the horizon, and actually hope here, not even on the horizon.
Yeah, exactly. And I like to live by example. I am a bi man. I am living with HIV and I am thriving. I am loved by people. Sure, I face some discrimination, but I face a whole lot more love. And that's just by being my true, genuine self. And I want other positive Bi Plus people to know that you too can live a really, really good life.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. I love you.
Wow. And I'm sorry, everyone, for the sniffles and the voice. And The watery eye.
I think we both did pretty okay with the sniffles, to be real. We've both been muting a couple times for our coughing. But I guess, is there any World AIDS Day specific calls to action or something that people can do to be visible? I'm wearing my red ribbon here.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I didn't realize I was wearing my Jonathan Van Ness pin as well. Read this book. It's a great resource.
What's the book?
So Jonathan Van Ness talks very openly about their journey with HIV in both of they've got 2 books out. And I read it after we had worked on that campaign, and it was so affirming to have multiple different touch points about the experience of HIV and different people's lived experiences. But sorry, I derailed that. What can people do this World AIDS Day to start a conversation, to connect with the community, to support organizations on December 1st?
On December 1st, you might even see in your city or town people out there shaking the can. We will have coin shakers from ACON, the AIDS Council of New South Wales, and the Bobby Goldsmith Foundation here in Sydney. But you'll see everywhere around the world, it is taken seriously, and it's a moment to spark conversations and also thoughts. I want you all to think about how you will react if your partner or a future partner discloses their HIV status and they are a person living with HIV. And I really hope that you remember this episode and know that everything's going to be all right, and treat them with nothing but love and respect, the love and respect every person deserves. I would love for people to consider how they are preventing HIV, because it's up to all of us, and be empowered in this knowledge, be empowered that you can be your own advocate in a healthcare setting, that you have the right to access HIV prevention, you have the right to access testing. And also as BI+ people, we have rights no matter what our relationship looks like, whether it's someone of the same gender or of a different gender, we all have the right to access the same healthcare. It's only through our visibility that we will make a big difference. And of course, here in Australia, we have the BI+ Sexual Health and HIV Needs Study. This is the first ever national study on BI+ people's experience of sexual health and HIV. That's the extra H in BIF. Bish.
BYOBB BISHH.
It's perfect. And so you can head to bishstudy.com, BISHH study.com. You can fill out this study and really contribute to research that will be used by policymakers, by service providers, to be able to actually improve the way that we do these things. I would really love it for all of you to fill it out if you're in Australia.
Yeah. It's also one of the most affirming experiences going through that survey. We've spoken about it a lot. We'll continue to speak about it. It is the most inclusive and considerate survey I've ever participated in. And I've spoken to a few people who have been involved in the creation of it, and the attention and care to every single question. Can we ask a question this way? If we do it this way, does that cut out these types of people, or does it include these types of people? What if there's a conflict in that? How do we navigate that? And so the study, just to experience, is very, very cool. But then it will also lead to some really, really profound insights for our community as well. So really implore you to get along and fill that out. And until next time, thank you for tuning in. We love you. Join us on Facebook, join the newsletter, of course, and we'll talk to you soon.
Share this episode with your friends. Love you all.
See ya.